Welcome everyone to our Getting Hybrid Work Right call series. This is the latest in our bi-monthly series about all things hybrid and flexible work. Please keep the chat open throughout the call. We will be leveraging that. You can use that to add comments, ask questions. We will be having a special guest conversation today, so you can ask questions directly of the guest. I'll be watching that as we go along. Welcome everyone. If this is your first time to this call series, it's hosted by the Institute for Corporate Productivity, I4CP. We discover the people practices that drive high performance. We do that through our research. We do that through the peer connections that we provide to our member companies. For our research, we really focus on what high performing companies are doing more than their low performing brethren. And we look at high performance from four different angles: revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. And so no matter what the topic is that we're researching across human resources and human capital, when we look at those different practices, we're looking at what the high performer companies are doing in that area versus low performers and trying to tease out what are the best and next practices in each of those areas. We are a member-based driven organization. You can see here just a small sample of our member companies, and we're adding new members all the time. I believe right now we're at an all-time high for the number of members. So we've had great growth these past many years. So you see here some of the great organizations, some very large, some medium sized, across all different market verticals and industries, really. If your company is not a member organization of I4CP and you would like to pursue that, just let us know. We'll give you my and our CEO's email at the end of the call. You can reach out via our website as well. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and I'm always happy to co-host this call with our CEO and co-founder, Kevin Oakes. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Tom. Good to be here.
Good to be with you, and I'm glad it's sunny where you are, finally.
Yeah, finally. The joke out here I'm in the Seattle area is that summer doesn't start until July 5th. And that was very true this year. But yeah, it's a nice, bright, sunny day, and glad Zeta picked that song to start out today.
Yeah. We'll be introducing our guest here in just a moment, but just a few housekeeping items to lead things off. As I noted, this is a bi-weekly call on getting hybrid and flexible work right. You can see we're going to have Mike Lauderdale from Fedex coming up on the 21st. In between the weeks where we focus on hybrid and flexible work, we have sort of a rotating series of calls focused on next practices in different areas of human capital and human resources. So you can see talent and learning will be the focus next Thursday. We've got Gina Generu from BMO Financial Group, Chief Learning Officer there. We've got Tiana Carter from Waste Management focusing on DE&I coming up on the 28th. All of these calls, no matter which series they're in, they're always Thursdays at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, and they're open to the public. So we encourage you to sign up for them, get them on your calendar. We record them so that if you ever miss one, you can always watch the recording later. Kevin, I thought maybe you could speak to this. We have just a couple of quick announcements about some things from I4CP. We haven't mentioned this lately on this call series, so I thought you could give voice to this.
Yeah, no problem, Tom. A lot of people don't realize we have an executive search function as part of I4CP. This is something we started several years ago after realizing that a number of the larger search firms were kind of tapping into our knowledge of the HR space and some of the HR executives and leaders in the space. And so we started helping our members with executive search purely for HR executives, and have been placing CHROs, heads of DE&I, heads of talent management, L&D, total rewards, talent acquisition, et cetera. So if you have openings on your team, certainly let us know. We'd be happy to try and help you.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's one of those many things that we do here at I4CP that not a lot of folks are aware of. Most people think of us first and foremost, of course, as a research organization. Maybe they're aware of the sort of peer networking that we provide, but there are some other services, and executive search is a good example of that. Also want to note, speaking of research, that our latest major study was dubbed the Talent Imperative. We did this in conjunction with Fortune magazine. We did the survey a little bit earlier in the year during the winter and early spring. The full report just came out fairly recently. For those of you that aren't I4CP members, there's also a executive brief that you can download. You've got the URL there, and our colleague Zeta is putting the relevant URLs over in the chat. So she just put that one up. So if you haven't downloaded the brief, please do that. If you are a I4CP member and you haven't downloaded the full report, please do that. Kevin, I know you recently did a webinar with one of the executives at Fortune. That I listened to the recording of that. I wasn't able to attend it live, but it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, Ellen McGirt joined me on that webinar. Ellen's a senior editor at Fortune. She's widely followed. She's got a great newsletter that she puts out on a weekly or biweekly basis called Race Ahead, and focuses on a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. Ellen and I partnered up and talked about what we found in the report. Honestly, she and I could have talked for 3 hours. It was just so fun getting her perspectives. And that won't be the last time that our audience hears from Ellen. We've got Ellen lined up to do some big things for us going forward. But we are very happy with the partnership that we had with Fortune, and we had their CEO, Alan Murray, at our last in-person conference. So if you're interested in this topic or in that webinar, you'll find more info on the links that Zeta's posted.
Yeah, I definitely found the webinar to be interesting, and I'd already read the report. So it's always good to be able to watch the videos and the webinars as well and get further insights. All right, before we introduce our guest, and there'll be an obvious connection here to our guest, wanted to do this quick poll, which Zeta is bringing up. Thank you. Which of the following product brands have you used or purchased for your friends or members of your family? So go ahead and choose any of these product brands. I'm anticipating certain ones will be the most popular. Not all 12 logos that are shown here on the screen are shown. We chose the ones that are most common in North America, since we realize the preponderance of our participants today with us are from North America. And
Tom,
results are coming in.
You said purchase was one of the qualifications here. I'm certain that I've paid for a lot of these products with my daughters. So I think that counts, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. For either yourself or friends, family, whatever it might be. It could be gifts for somebody. Absolutely. All right. So here's the results. And I am not surprised that North Face came in #1. That's certainly the one that I'm most familiar with. My winter jacket is a forest green North Face jacket that I've had for years, and it holds up. And I live in Rochester, New York, of all places. We get a lot of snow here, so that North Face jacket's been great. I'm also very familiar with the brands like Vans and Timberland and Dickies. I used to have a JanSport backpack, I believe. So not surprised at some of the winners here, but you're not as well. So thank you for participating in that. And the connection to our guest will be very apparent here in a moment. Kevin, why don't you kick off the conversation with our special guest today?
Yeah, sure. I'm thrilled to welcome Jessica here to be our special guest. Jessica's the Vice President of Global Benefits, Wellbeing, and Mobility at VF. Jessica, thanks for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about all the great things we're doing at VF.
Jessica, we've been working with VF for a long time, and you've been a leader in benefits and total rewards, not only at VF, but at other organizations such as Starwood, and you were at Deloitte before that. Now the past 5 years at VF. Love to have you just sort of introduce yourself and expand on some of those brands that we just showed, and get people a little bit more familiar with the corporation itself.
Sure. So if we could just pop to the next slide. As you've seen, VF is the company behind many of the brands you love and purchase, not just for yourselves, but for your family. I happen to be wearing my Vans shirt today, but I'm located in Denver, which is where our Ultra, our JanSport, our Smartwool, and North Face brands also are co-located in our headquarters. If you go to the next one, we're a fairly large company. We've got about $12 billion in annual revenue with 35,000 associates across the globe. And our 12 brands are sold in more than 125 countries. In addition to direct to consumer and our wholesale partners, we also have 1,300 or so of our own retail stores. Our purpose is really important to us at VF, and it guides everything that we do, along with our guiding principles, which are shown here. And we're very proud to have been recognized by many organizations for the way we live our purpose.
I love some of those guiding principles, Jessica. Those are well thought out.
Thank you. As I mentioned, I'm in Denver, but we also have headquarters in California, in Texas, New York, New Hampshire, and then we have regional headquarters for our associates in Stabio, Switzerland, which also is the headquarters for some of the brands that maybe fewer of the folks on the call are familiar with, as well as a regional office in Shanghai, China.
Great.
So in terms of, myself, I've been with the organization for about 5 years. My responsibility really was more focused on global benefits, but we've expanded, that role to include all of our well-being programs, as well as our mobility program. And really, that has a lot to do with the way we think about a holistic vision for well-being at VF.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you have that in your title. I love that well-being is part of your title overall. And I imagine that this really is the basis of your well-being efforts at VF.
Yeah, so really a few years ago, we began to have discussions with our leadership team about how a culture of well-being can be a source of competitive advantage. And I will say that some of the research that I4CP did in that area really helped inform our thinking. So we had already started to upgrade our programs more from a traditional benefits program to more of a well-being program, but we wanted to go further and tie it all together for our associates and really think through well-being. It's not just wellness anymore, really an outcrop of healthcare and trying to really maintain healthcare costs, but it had really evolved into an important aspect of how we wanted to do business and our strategy for helping people be engaged and productive. And so part of that approach included branding our programs together so that associates would recognize when we're sharing something about a program or a benefit that might be of interest to them, that could support them. And by tying it all together, really helping them understand that they all impact each other. So our branding for our program aligns with our employee value proposition, which is to limit less, to blur the line between a career and a calling. And we've designed Live Limitless to really give you tools and resources that align with that, to take on those challenges, to jump at opportunities and to really be your very best, whether that's with your body, mind, your finances, your career, or your sense of community and social connection. And I think, it makes sense for us to really look at it this way because they all impact each other. If your finances aren't right, it can have a toll on your emotional or your physical well-being. If you're, not feeling like you belong at work, it can leave you frustrated with your career and lead to emotional stress. And certainly physical issues and social determinants of health have a huge impact on a number of these areas as well. So we think flexibility, what we'll be talking about today, really, and autonomy, which is an aspect of that, both in terms of location and scheduling, have a huge impact on multiple aspects of well-being.
Yeah, and I love that you've taken this holistic approach, and I'm super happy to hear that we had some influence on that. The holistic well-being study that we published a while ago has been very, very popular, and kudos to our team that put that together, particularly Carol Morrison, one of our analysts. We're actually expanding on that study, and we're honing in the next 2 weeks on the middle category here, the financial category, and just trying to explore financial well-being and how that's impacting other aspects of well-being inside of organizations, and how companies are trying to help their employees with that, that particular category of well-being. So look for that survey; it'll come out in the next couple of weeks. But obviously, you just mentioned that hybrid and flexible work is important, obviously, and part of this to VF. Tell us a little bit about how you're approaching that and how you've been approaching that during the pandemic.
Yeah, so we started really early. We were probably 2 or 3 months into the pandemic when our CHRO pulled a group of us together to really start thinking about the future of work. And initially we held leadership discussions and we conducted some broad-based associate focus groups globally. And then we conducted a survey to really help us identify what was working about working remotely, what wasn't, and also to get a sense of what our leaders and our associates' expectations were going to be for the future. And pretty early on, we coalesced on this vision. I would say that even in the beginning, our leaders, many of them just couldn't wait to get back to the office, and some of our associates too. But then as time passed, we started to realize that many of our leaders had adjusted their thinking, and they were really seeing, the benefits of being home themselves and for their teams. And so this vision for a hybrid work environment really came into clearer focus. We realized there was a need based on what we were experiencing to be in the office. Certainly there are some roles that work with materials, they need tools, and that not being in the office was a bit of a challenge. But we also started to realize that we were missing that social connection with our teams. And it's taking, and this is something we'll talk about when we get to hybrid, it takes a lot more effort to connect and collaborate in a virtual environment. It's completely possible, but it's not always the best medium in order to do that. And so we aligned that we felt that the workplace could take many forms. When we think about work, we thought about, previously all of us thought like the office was work. You go to work. Well, you can work anywhere. And so we wanted to be more flexible, not just in the where, but in the when. We wanted, though, to make sure that the office remained important as a purposeful space to bring us together, to drive innovation, creativity, and collaboration, as well as social connection. And we really needed to focus more on outcomes than, the comment I've heard, it's not butts and seats, right? It's what you do that makes the most difference. And we also recognize, as many of us pull together in teams to collaborate differently, our connection with people that maybe we hadn't ever spoken to before increased because of the ability to be virtual. The teams that we put together to work on things could work differently being virtual than if everybody needed to be in the office. And it afforded us some speed and diversity of thinking that maybe we hadn't tapped into as much in the past. And so we really felt that those were going to be important. So when we thought about our future, we thought that we wanted to focus more on a hybrid environment. So we did assign different categories and about whether you're the office-based or office flex fully remote, but really our focus was developing more of an office flex environment. And we wanted to make sure that we were not being prescriptive per se in how we did that, but really focus on holding ourselves accountable for what we needed to achieve and giving our associates the space to figure out how to best make that best work for themselves and their teams, but also expecting them to be personally flexible by being where and when they need to be in order to get work done.
So many good things there, Jessica. I like the top right corner, just emphasizing that people can connect and collaborate both in virtual and physical environments. Your emphasis on outcomes-based performance and performance management as opposed to the old butts and seats approach. And then something else that several of our studies, including the most recent talent imperative study, found is that this flexibility goes beyond just hybrid locations, but also gets into the when of work. And that's particularly important for what you see there in your bottom left, for those that are office-based. I mean, it's important for everybody. Those of us that are laptop workers, oftentimes we prefer to work at night or what have you. But for those that have to be in a specific location to get their work done, and they don't have that hybrid location flexibility, offering them some sort of time-based, whether it's hours of the day or days of the week or something, in addition to other benefit flexibility and things like that. Can you say a little bit more about that? It says, on the bottom left there, I see work is location specific for these folks, but may have time-based flexibility. Do you have any examples of where you've been experimenting there?
Yeah, and I will say that when we took a look at these three tiers, we developed a pretty a uniform criteria for assessing most of the roles. And I will say in our office environments, which are going to be different than our distribution center and our retail space by virtue of the work that they do, we really don't have a very large group of office-based associates. The vast majority of associates within VF are office flex. We do have more remote associates than we did by far before the pandemic. But I would say, 75% of our associates are considered office flex, and maybe 2-3% are considered office space. And those are for the roles that you might imagine. You've got people working in security and reception. You've got people who are working digital technology that need to be on site to be able to support people. When we think about location specific, the time-based flexibility for that is the ability to come in a little earlier, a little later. A lot of us have global roles, and we're speaking with people on a regular basis in Asia or in Europe or in multiple time zones. And so if you require people to be in the office for the traditional 9 to 5, you're really extending some of those folks' stays to be not necessarily to a degree that would make them be productive. You can't have meetings with Asia and Europe and be in the office all day. That's a 12-hour day. And that's really that's the road to burnout.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's sort of what we've been trying to enable with our teams.
One of your principles from the earlier slide I noted too was, I believe it was act with empathy. So I'm assuming there might also be, maybe now more so than say 5 years ago, a little bit more empathy from managers if somebody has say middle of the day daycare responsibility they have to jump out to, or they need to go run and pick a kid up from school and then get back to the office afterward, that sort of thing.
Yeah, completely. And if you want to go to the next slide, that just gives you a sense of the resources that we put together. And when we've started having these conversations, we really needed to be able to educate our leaders on how this new environment would work, because we all went home and everybody was home. And so there wasn't a lot of opportunity for adjustment. And we did see that people were, spending all too long on Zooms, back to back, not taking breaks, too many emails. And so as we started thinking about this new hybrid environment, we really needed to make sure that our leaders involved their teams in how we decided what was going to work best. So we didn't have a top-down, we've heard of some companies that have said, you're going to be in these 2 days, you're going to be in these 3 days. It's really not the way we wanted to approach it, because that's not flexibility. That doesn't allow autonomy. But we did know that it was going to be important for our teams to get together and align on these things as a group. And one of the things that we did was we created, in addition to having a number of sessions with our leaders, and again, I4CP came and spoke with some of our brand leaders to talk about, the war for talent and how this was going to be important in order for us to be able to maintain talent going forward. How do you lead a conversation about this without leaning too much into your own bias? A lot of our managers are successful because they worked a certain way and they're comfortable with working in that way. But the talent market was changing, and we really needed for them to kind of step out and think about, not unlike how our customers now don't always want to go to brick and mortar. They don't always want to go to a North Face store. They want to go online, and they want to shop at midnight and when it's convenient for them. And so just like that, we needed to start thinking about how our talent was going to have those kinds of wants and preferences as well. And so we really tried to educate them about how to step outside of what maybe has worked before, and really listen to what their teams needed, and then guide them through a conversation to create a charter on how the team was going to work together. And part of that is, to talk about, days we're going to agree to be in the office, maybe core hours we're going to agree to, in order to be able to support that kind of flexibility, whether it's somebody who wants to, be available for drop-offs or pickups with kids. It could be elder care. It could be people who, want to spend Friday afternoons heading up to the mountain as opposed to being in the office. And we created some personas to really share with our managers how other people may view flexibility. So it wasn't just my own personal definition of it, which I'm totally flexible. That's exactly me. I plan, I plan my work based on where I need to be. But in some cases, it may be that you've got responsibilities that, in terms of managing your emotional and social and financial well-being, having a different schedule might work better for you. And if it fits within what the team needs, because at the end of the day, business needs to drive where and when the work gets done. That's the overarching, principle behind everything. But if there's flexibility and autonomy to determine as a team how we're going to do that, then we should enable that as much as possible.
And given that autonomy that you're giving to managers, Jessica, describe a little bit these aids that are here on the screen on the left-hand side, the team charter and some of the other checklists and tools that you put together here.
Yeah, so the leadership guide was to really prepare people to have a conversation with their teams about how and where we're going to work together as a team. And then the Workplace Next team charter, and Workplace Next is what we're calling our future of work program. It's really more of our hybrid work program now because the future is here, is really to talk about the rules of the road, how we're going to be flexible. And that means that the manager is going to be flexible. That means that the associate's going to be flexible. It's not just like, well, okay, well, I'm not coming in on Tuesdays and that's that. It's a conversation. And it needs to be an agreed upon conversation. And if we agree that Tuesdays isn't going to be the day we're going to collaborate together, maybe it's going to be Wednesdays, then we're all going to commit to that. It's not a requirement, but it's a suggestion. Like, these are the days we're going to have our one-on-ones. These are the days that we're going to schedule, our team collaboration meetings with other teams. And some of that involved, and it was complicated, I think, for some people to think like, oh, I'm going to have to talk to other teams about when they're going to be in, and be more intentional about my scheduling and how we're going to work, as opposed to just going and seeing what happens. Kind of need to be more planful than we have been in the past. And that's a unique skill that we need to develop. And the idea behind the charters is that we're going to talk about what we can do virtually, what we're going to come together to do. Maybe it's kickoff meetings. Maybe it's, we have a monthly staff meeting and we're all going to get together to do that. And are we going to have core hours, and what those are going to be? And, for example, I know that some teams have Tuesdays and Wednesdays tend to be the biggest days in the office across all of our locations. Some teams will say we'll be on Tuesday and Wednesday, but our core hours are going to be 10 to 3. And we're going to schedule all of the meetings that we're going to be together in during those times. And we know that we have global meetings on Mondays and Thursdays, so that we can accommodate the varying schedules to adjust our time zones to reflect those partnerships. And the goal of the charter is that it's a living document. It's not a once and done. We need to revisit it on a regular basis and agree as a team on how we're going to work together more regularly. We also have a number
does
of
each
tools.
team have a unique charter, or is this a charter for all teams?
It's a template. It's a template, but it's for all team leaders to have and keep up to date, and put it in a place where everybody can see it. Because one of the concerns we had is that as you have change within the organization, you need to be able to share it with people who are new to the team, including new people leaders.
So Jessica, there is a lot of goodness on this slide. We've got almost 200 people on the call with us today, and I don't know, there's no way for me to know, but I'm guessing a lot of them have taken a screenshot of this slide because it gives folks sort of a roadmap for, if they haven't already done so or they're just starting, what kind of resources they might want to create for both their leaders and their employees. So a couple of things that the chat has also expanded here while we've been sitting on this slide and talking about these resources. One question was, what role did employees, not just the top leaders in the organization, but all employees have in sort of guiding both your switch to hybrid and flex overall, but then also the creation of these kind of tools? What kind of changes have you had over the past couple of years to your listening strategy?
Yeah, well, so we do have a culture survey that we conduct. We just did it actually in May, and we've done it a few times a year for the last few years, but typically we would do it one time a year. And then we also did a specific survey on Workplace Next to understand what the challenges are, what was easier at home, what was easier at work, what people were missing, what people were liking about being remote, so that we could build that into our thinking and share that with our leaders. And like I said, as we went along, more of the people leaders were on board than they were in the beginning. So when we settled on this, I think that, you know, they had seen their own experiences with their own teams, and they were open, much more so than they would have been if we had rolled this out back in 2020. We actually rolled this all out back in the summer of last year, thinking that there wouldn't be an Omicron surge and that we'd be coming back to the office sooner than we did. But really, we had a pretty broad-based team involved. We, in addition to doing the focus groups, which I mentioned, the pulse survey, we had a group of folks from talent, digital technology, real estate, HR business partners, change management folks involved in helping us create a number of these tools, and then shared them with some folks within the organization to get their feedback before we finalize them. And I'll say that it's an ongoing process. So these are tools that we launched last year. We're actually in the middle of a refresh now that we're back. And we'll be doing another survey in September, is targeted to learn how this is going. You know, what are the pain points? What are people happy about? What are the frustrations? And really trying to focus in on being more intentional, because I think that the biggest concern that we have with this at this moment is, you know, people are something reluctant to ask people to come in, and they want permission, I would say, to have requirements. And it's been our strategy all along that if there's a need for people to be in, then the manager should articulate that. But it shouldn't be, you come into the office to sit and be at your workstation all day. It should be for things that are best done in a group and having that collaboration. And so we're trying to help people start thinking to that point about being more intentional. If you're going to come into the office for one-on-ones, don't plan on working on a big report. Maybe do that on another day. If you're going to be meeting with folks, maybe get up and get away from your desk and have a conversation over coffee. You know, it doesn't have to be in a conference room. Really trying to open our minds to how we really leverage this new hybrid environment as effectively as we can.
And that really is the key, focusing on intentionality, business purpose, outcomes, and not manager preference. And if that can be done consistently across the organization and really become a part of the new, you know, we'll say renovated culture of the organization, that it's not going to be just manager fiat, manager preference, then that, I think that can get solidified, and any issues with that will go away. There was a question from the chat, also from Diane. I can only assume her question basically, what's the uptake of these tools been like? I assume at one point the managers were clamoring, like you say, they wanted support and how and when to ask people to come in. So I assume that most managers, if not all, have been very happy to receive these kind of tools, as well as employees, for those that are meant for the employees themselves.
I would say yes. I don't have all of our click rates available, but
Sure.
we did training early on when we launched this site. Of all the sites that we offer for well-being, had like over 2,000, and this is just US, this particular site, because the way we've had to activate this approach is very different depending upon the market that we're in, because of tax and legal and other reasons. But this site got the most hits of any site that we had ever, you know, offered. We know that our HR business partners were really critical in the business to making sure that our managers were having these conversations. And it's something we've been asking folks, you know, about as we've been going through the last couple of months, and as we invited people back to begin working their plans. You know, we've referenced the expectation numerous times. We actually just launched another training for folks, helping them understand what the tax implications of working in different locations would be, and what our requirements are going to be if you are working from a location other than your home office location for a certain period of time. And so we're getting very high participation rates on that, and making sure that people are actually taking that training. And then if they are going to be in the office less than 100% of the time, which you could be office flex and choose to do that if that's your preference, that we're really clear on understanding when you're going to be in the office, particularly if you live in a tax jurisdiction that's not the same as where our offices are located in, so that people aren't scrambling and looking for tax adjustments at the end of the year, which our payroll team really can't support. So there's been a lot of attention and participation, and I expect that that's going to continue.
Jessica, we just had a question come in that was also on my mind, just around the physical offices, and you talked about being intentional and having a purpose when you do come into the office. Has that caused you to change the layout of the offices, or at least a plan for the change, or maybe even the footprint overall of some of your corporate real estate?
Not yet in terms of our corporate real estate, but I will say that we do have now, we have a new tool that we're using called iOffice, where people who are not regularly in the office, because I would say about 25-30% of our associates are now remote, where they can come in and they can book a space. So they don't need to look for conference room space. They can look for space in the office that they're going to be visiting. If I'm going to visit my team in Greensboro, which I still have folks that I go out there to visit regularly, I can book a space through that. I can see where everybody is sitting within the organization, depending upon what office I'm looking for. So if I'm going to be in, I can try to coordinate a space with other folks who are coming in remote to try to find the same area that we can sit in. I think that that's going to be something that we're going to be taking a look at as we start to see what the patterns are. I said before, I think we're seeing Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we're seeing really high uptick. And there are usually 1 or 2 days of every month where I would say, we probably have about 70% of the people with an assigned workspace are in the office in Denver, at least. I know that some of the other offices are a little bit different. So once we see that, I think that we'll understand whether there are going to be any other opportunities for folks who are maybe not coming in regularly. But that's not something that we decided to lead with. We wanted to see where things went before we took a look at that.
Can you repeat for us the name of the application? I assume it's a vendor that
Yeah,
you use, iOffice.
I don't know the actual vendor name. I know it's called iOffice. It could be that. It's something that our workplace environments teams and our real estate teams are leveraging.
Yeah, no, I asked for that just because I'm assuming with so many folks on the call, there may be some organizations attending here today that might be looking for a solution like that. And I know there's a few of them out there. So appreciate that.
Before, I would not know where anybody sat. So regardless of the ability to go in, I can now look for somebody and find out, they're on the 3rd floor, the 10th floor, and it's much easier.
Yeah, so it has benefits even aside from the changes to the way we work lately. There was also a question in the chat, how and even if you're having to support or handle any managers or any employees that are maybe seeing some of the headlines from the Elon Musks and Jamie Dimons of the world, some of the prominent CEOs that are, making very bold statements about how, nope, we're going to go back to the old way. Everyone's going to come into the office. When you see those headlines, do you get any questions like, why can't we be like that at VF, or is the culture so different that it's really not coming up?
I think that there are always going to be certain individuals for whom this is a harder shift to make than others. But we have been very clear all along that we're not going to be prescriptive. And we're too early in. So we opened officially. Our office has been open for quite a while. So I've been able to come into the office for well over a year now, whenever I needed to. But we really didn't say, okay, now the offices are welcoming to everybody and expecting everybody to work their plan until around April, mid-April. So we're too early on for us to say, that this is not working. And I think that it would need to be shown that it's not working for us to really start to rethink whether or not we wanted to make any adjustments. But that's been the way we've approached this all along. When we rolled this out, we were very clear that this is a test and learn situation. Nobody's done this before. There have been some companies that have allowed a lot of people to work remotely, but they were not the market. And the market is in this space right now. And so we really need to see where this goes, as a globe.
Absolutely. Like you said, it's too early to know if it's working or not working. And just asked in the chat, what are you using for success criteria, or what will you be using? I assume your overall engagement survey will be one factor, your employee experience survey. Anything else though? Any other specific metrics you might be looking at?
Yeah, so we're in the process of developing a dashboard now that we're starting to get more of that data in, not just about that I'm office flex, but how often am I planning on being in the office on a regular basis? So, 20%, 40%, 60%, whatever it is. And so we're going to start taking a look at metrics with regard to retention and attrition and other things longer term in terms of movement within the organization. But we needed to get that data we use Workday. We needed to be able to get that data into Workday before we could really start to track that and develop a baseline.
Yeah, it certainly gives anyone in large organizations that works in people analytics, human capital analytics, a whole new dimension on which to use their skills and try and figure out some interesting findings for the rest of the team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it goes beyond just personal preference or changes. It'll also be whether or not there's any impacts within how we're operating as a business and all of that as well. So I think that we're 3-4 months in, and I think that we'll have a better story to tell on that after we've had it for a bit longer.
Jessica, a question came in from Jim on how you've marketed the training and the resources. Are you marketing this directly to managers or employees, or working through HRBPs, or some other method?
We really wanted it to be business led. So we didn't want it to be like a top down kind of, we certainly have messages that are coming out from the center about the new tools and resources, but our HR business partners were invaluable in helping us work with their managers to ensure that this was happening. And when we originally identified which roles could be remote versus which one were office flex, we had criteria that we applied, and then the HR business partners met with the leaders of the teams to really confirm that based on what the job descriptions were, based on what we knew of the role, that we had gotten it right. And so it's been really throughout the business, not just coming from HR, how this is evolving.
So I'm kind of curious on culture. You mentioned that you've done a couple culture surveys over time. Have you seen a shift in the culture since you've implemented these resources and gone to this more flexible environment?
Yeah, so our culture survey just wrapped up, and I believe that the results are going to be shared broadly within VF next week. I would say that I will feel more confident on the understanding of how this specifically is working when we roll out the next pulse survey, because it has specific questions about, are people in the office more or less than they expected? Are people finding that certain things are easier in a hybrid environment versus when they were in office all the time, or fully remote, or harder? So I think that that'll give us a better sense than our culture, which from what I've seen from the initial results is strong relative to how it has been over the last few years.
Yeah, fair enough. And I don't want you to reveal anything on this call that the employees haven't seen yet. So thank you for sharing that. Well, should we shift focus to well-being for a second? I know we started out the call talking about that. I know we've got a poll as well on this, but that's in your title, and you've had a lot of focus on this area, particularly in mental health and emotional health inside the organization. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us what you've done in those areas.
Yeah, so we've actually done quite a lot, and we started before the pandemic, really focusing in on mental health in particular. We had created a global task force to really align our efforts and coordinate, because a lot of really interesting and good stuff was happening throughout the globe, but we really didn't have a unified approach to how we were going to talk about mental health and well-being within VF. And so the group got together to, really focus on how we were going to be more intentional about removing stigma, expanding access to resources, and how we were going to, address gaps that we identified in terms of providing resources for mental health and well-being throughout the globe. In addition to stigma, there are markets that we operate in where there are just very few resources, whether they be statutory or otherwise, available to support people there. So we use that as an opportunity to train our senior leaders on mental health awareness in all of our regions. And that leader training was extremely well received. And what it showed us was that our leaders really wanted to be able to talk with their peers about what they were experiencing with their teams and in their own, personal lives. And to have an opportunity to realize that they were not alone. It may not be their personal issue, but the fact that it's so prevalent and to get confirmation of that really helps people break down that barrier to seeking help. We also expanded our EAP. We had it in the United States, we'd had it in Asia, and in pockets elsewhere, but now every associate at VF has access to our EAP. And we promote it heavily. And I will say that in the beginning, when we did not have that, it was a bit of a challenge as we were starting to communicate support throughout the pandemic, because we really didn't have one place that everybody could reach out to for help. And now we do. We're in various stages of creating time to talk reps. Our Europe region has led the way on that, and we're working to roll that out, training for folks who are interested in doing that later at the beginning of this fall. And we've been hosting a lot of well-being sessions. Some are global for all of our associates through our EAP. Some of them are leveraging our vendors, whether that be our Bright Horizons partnership, our partnership with Rethink, some of our other medical or other benefit providers, to really try to engage people in these resources and help them understand what we have. In the US, we're really trying a multi-channel approach. We've got text therapy, online therapy, in-person therapy, you name it, because just like we were talking about with consumers, people want to consume mental health resources and other well-being resources differently as well. And I will say that we've really upped our game this year. We were able to bring on a team member into the well-being COE that really her focus is engagement and really trying to market our programs in a different way. And we've had more campaigns. And now that the pandemic is subsiding, doing more
knock on wood.
doing more on-site events. So we're in the process of visiting a number of our distribution centers in the United States and Canada to be able to really, educate them. They come on board, they get their orientation, we send them information for open enrollment, but they don't have access to email. They're not looking at this stuff all the time. And so being available to answer their questions, and we've been hearing, oh, I didn't know we had that. So we've got to do more of that outreach. And I think that that's going to make a really positive impact. Our next step is to tackle the retail space. All of our retail associates, part-time or otherwise, have access to EAP and a few other resources. We need to make sure that they're all available, that they're all aware of them. And then our full-timers need some I think, help understanding all of the things that we have to support them as well.
That's a great set of resources, and both new ones and extensions of old ones. One of the first things you mentioned caught my eye was managers wanting to talk to each other, to peer-to-peer connection, to learn more about and to be able to share. And I think, that's a big change from the way, what we're expecting of managers around overall well-being and particular mental health is a big change from the past, where, in the past, when it would come up, it's like, they were maybe told not to address it directly, send them to HR. That's why we have the EAP, that kind of thing. And so to suddenly shift gears, it's a massive, massive change for managers. So it's not at all surprising that they would want to be able to talk about it with each other.
Yeah, we launched Notice, Talk, Act at Work through our learning management system and Workday the end of last year. And really what the goal of that is any people leader can access it. And it really is trying to explain to them, you're not expected to fix this, but what we want you to do is notice. We want you to be empathetic, and we want you to connect people to the right resources. And we've included some resources for, if it's an emergency, which we had never shared more broadly before, versus, what are the resources to somebody who may just need a little bit of help and how to get them to the right place. And we've started to have some of our brands make it mandatory for their managers. And I'm looking forward. I know that we've got some positive testimonials coming that we're going to be sharing with the rest of the population. And I'm hoping other brands are going to make it required for managers as well.
Well, that's great. What you're seeing here on the screen is the report that we mentioned earlier on in the call, and I know Zeta already provided the link to that in the chat. That report, unlike most of our major study reports, is available to the public. We did this one during 2020, somewhat earlier on in the pandemic, and it was so important for so many organizations. We really wanted to have it have a wider audience, so you can download that very robust report. Kevin mentioned that we did have a poll here on holistic well-being. We're just hoping to get some updated data from you all on the call today. Which of the following aspects of holistic well-being do you anticipate your organization focusing on the most for the rest of this year and going into 2023? We've been talking a lot about mental and emotional health on the call today with Jessica. We mentioned earlier, financial is something that we're going to be doing a survey on here in a couple of weeks, and we're hearing more and more from both our member and non-member organizations that that's an area that a lot of companies are focusing more and more on in terms of resources. But what about all these areas? Please take a moment and do this poll. We've got votes coming in already. Appreciate that. We'll give it another few minutes here. Jessica, I'm curious, while people are still voting, what besides the mental health area, some of these other areas, I know you leveraged our research for some of the work that you did in this regard. What are some of the things that'll be coming around the corner for you?
Yeah, so we've been definitely focusing on financial well-being in my team because we understand that a lot of our associates, have challenges with regard to debt, savings, and so there are some programs that we've made available through our 401k record keeper with Fidelity to our associates, and we're going to continue to do that. We did a VF Saves Week earlier this year to try to really educate people about the 401k plan, particularly in our retail and DC populations, that we want them to maximize our match. We have 100% on 6% match. So leaving money on the table is if you can manage to make the deferrals, it's a really great opportunity for associates. And there's more to come in terms of things that we're planning on doing later this year. I think emotional health is going to continue to be a challenge. I just think about how it feels like it's just one hit after the other these days, whether it's social unrest or SCOTUS or Ukraine or what have you. And really, as people are trying to figure out this new environment, they're emotionally taxed, and I think we need to really encourage them to do things that are going to be good, not just for their mental and emotional health, but physical health. Really trying to invest more time with people. We rolled out a global voluntary time off policy earlier this year. We'd had it in pockets throughout the organization, really trying to get people connected with their communities. We know that when we give back, we feel better about ourselves, not just the impact that we make for other people. So really trying to encourage more of that. And I know our IDEA team is really focused on taking actions within the organization in terms of helping managers be more inclusive and really foster that sense of connection and belonging. And I'm sure that's going to continue as well. When I filled out my poll, I chose everything. So I feel like it's all important and yeah. It's needed more than ever, really, because I think that whether you want to call it languishing or the great burnout, I think that a lot of us are really struggling right now, and maybe it's not to the degree that you need to seek mental support, emotional support, but just to know that this is an organization that really cares about your well-being, your whole self, I think is really important for people, and to make sure that they understand all the things that we're doing to try to help with that.
The results are interesting, Tom. I find it interesting that physical health actually came in last out of all these. And I certainly would just attribute that to we've kind of been there, done that, and it's sort of a given in a lot of organizations. But all of these aspects of holistic well-being affect physical health, right? And it is interesting to see that career came in second after mental and emotional health.
Yeah, I picked up on that too. I think, the latest numbers, job openings and turnover just came out, the JOLTS data from BLS yesterday, and it is looking like that we're seeing a bit of a plateau and a little bit of a flattening of what had been such a rising so-called great resignation. It's still at near historic highs, so it's not like it's going away. I think some industries are seeing the change faster than others. Some of the high-flying tech companies laying folks off and a few other industries, but a lot of other industries still very much needing to focus on retaining and attracting talent in a very, very challenging labor market. So not surprising that career, happiness with your job, advancement opportunities, and so on would rank a solid number 2 behind the sort of obvious. I think we all knew mental and emotional would probably come in number 1 in the survey. But the other thing I note here is just all of them were around 0.25% or 25% or more. So as you did, Jessica, I think a lot of people, you weren't alone in voting for all of them.
Yeah, I think that career is absolutely important, but I also think that it's part of this feeling that there's just so much going on right now, and people are looking for an element of control. And I think that that's making, the grass is always greener, I think is definitely an element of what we've seen. And I totally agree. I think the pendulum is starting to swing back, but I think that, people are really looking for something to help with their emotional stability. And I think that the career, feeling the need to make progress in their career, not just the complete, fear of missing out in the aspect of social networks and media is driving some of that too. They think, well, I should be looking elsewhere, instead of, what we're trying to do is get people to think about, well, what do I have here and how can I make that better for myself?
Jessica, I know we're just about out of time here. I want to make sure I take the time to thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you sharing everything you've shared, particularly some of the very specific slides around VF, and we really appreciate the partnership that we have with VF.
Thank you very much. I've really appreciated being able to share, and I hope that the audience found it helpful. And I'm very interested in hearing the next one. What's working for Fedex. So I'll be listening into that one.
I echo Kevin's thanks. You've been a great guest, Jessica. We've had great conversation in the chat. So thanks everyone for participating today. As Jessica just mentioned, we're all looking forward to the next call in this series, which will be in 2 weeks on July 21st, when we'll have Mike Lauderdale, Vice President of Human Resources for Fedex Services. Fedex, if you don't know, is composed of a lot of different sort of business units, and he is the head of HR for one of the larger ones, Fedex Services. So he'll be joining us on the 21st. So once again, thanks everyone. Glad everyone could join us. You can also join us in person in March of next year at our conference, the I4CP Next Practices Now conference. So we'd encourage you, if you haven't been out to the website, Zeta, as always, has just added the link for that. You can get more information. We're going to be rolling out information on that great event in terms of some speakers here fairly soon. We're starting to line those up, and so a lot more to come on that. It's a great event every year in March. Every year now that we're done with online only, although there is an online option for it. So please make a note of that link and check that conference out as well. Look forward to having you with us on future Thursdays, whether it's the Next Practice Now series or this Getting Hybrid Work Right series. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. And thanks once again, Jessica, for your time today. It was wonderful. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.